I'm going to share with you some insights from a research program that my husband and I were involved with and had a chance to write a think piece for. It was done by an organization called the International Center for Vocational Education and Training in Australia. And we were very excited about this research and very excited about the results of it. So I've actually spent hours and hours going through pages of the results of the details of this research and have narrowed it down to what I hope, and we'll see how well I did. I didn't do it in a 55-minute video, but maybe that could be a project for our conference. So where I want to start is Ashok touched on the concept of wisdom this morning, and Subhash touched on the concept of instinct or intuition. So they touched on those two concepts. What I want to do is open the door to those two concepts and really dive into that ocean of what is that all about in relationship to knowledge. We are in a knowledge era. I think that that's very clear. And as I look out upon you as knowledge professionals, I feel like I can say to you, thank you for the job and the work that you have done to help bring forth this new level of consciousness, this new mindset that we call the knowledge era. We've been in the industrial era. We evolved to the information age, and now we are in a knowledge era. My husband and I are very interested in what's next, which is the wisdom age. That's where the spirituality comes in. But for today, I want to talk about the knowledge era, because while that era has definitely dawned, we still have a lot of work to bring it to its maturity. My husband and I have done many programs with executives on spirituality, also on human values. We've worked with the United Nations Habitat to develop human values programs for their leaders in the water and sanitation sector. The first thing that we have to do when we get ready to develop a program, which is an expanded consciousness or a shift or evolution in mindset, the first thing we have to do is step back. And we have to look at what are the concepts and the language that are going to do two things. One, what are the new concepts and language that are going to help people expand and evolve their consciousness and their mindsets? The second one is, how are we going to build the bridges for people to walk across so that they can walk the path of this expansion? So today, what I want to offer to you is some concepts and language that is an example. It's not a definitive list by any means, but it's an example of what we believe this knowledge era can begin to evolve to as it matures. First of all, the research identified the knowledge era to have these characteristics. There's multiple and competing agendas and priorities. I'm sure you can all relate to that. There's diversity in ideologies in this knowledge era. There's more ambiguity. There's multiple roles that we are playing. William talked about that this morning, and having innovation and knowledge be a dual role. There's lots of uncertainty, chaos. There's contradictions. But there's also a lot of energy and creativity in this knowledge era. Overall, the competencies that this research felt that we were going to need in this knowledge era was the ability to balance our life, our work, our learning, and our knowing. The ability to rapidly acquire new skills, the ability to problem solve and make sense in new contexts, and also to make sense in multiple contexts. The ability to maintain a balance between productivity and creativity, and the ability to collaborate face-to-face as well as in virtual environments. Another thing the research found, which was very dear to our hearts because we do a lot of work with human values, they found that there were certain human values that were essential to this knowledge era, and most importantly, that these values needed to be reclaimed in the workplace today. You'll probably agree with that in many ways. The values at the individual level they felt needed to be reclaimed were trustworthiness, honesty, integrity, engagement, selflessness, and equanimity. The values they felt needed to be reclaimed in relationship to others is generosity, collaboration like Ed spoke about, humility, openness, and tolerance. There's 4 concepts from the research that I want to just touch upon in the next few minutes, and I'll talk about each one of these in a little bit. I'll talk about the competencies that they recognized for each one. The first one is to move beyond training and professional development, to move beyond those 2 concepts into a capability development model. The second one is to evolve to a life-based learning model. The third one is to use a strength-based orientation, and the fourth one is to develop business wisdom. Can you already begin to see the concepts and the language that are not common today as we're starting into this knowledge era? These are concepts that I believe are going to gain some strength and we'll hear more about as this era begins to mature. In moving beyond training and professional development to capability development, what they meant was training is very much expert-oriented and very much expert learning. The learner is a passive receiver of expertise. The professional development model is a learner as a worker. Again, there's a much more diverse set of learning, but it's all focused around the person and their job position or their responsibilities. The capability development model that they're speaking about that we need to evolve to is where you see the learner as a whole person. The competencies that they see for the capability development model are that we move away from segmented activities to holistic activities that have more meaning and purpose to the individual person. We also use positive and appreciative mindsets and approaches to the learning. We create balance and integration between life and work. Now notice the distinction here. We've got a lot of work-life balance programs going on right now. But what they're talking about is a balance and integration between life and work. We empower people to give their expertise as people rather than procedures or information. As we tap into people, into their humanness, into their instincts and innate wisdom, we tap into a much deeper source of expertise than just their information or their procedures that they're expert at. Have people take responsibility for their own self-directed learning and then create an organization that empowers that self-directed learning. The second component is to evolve to a life-based model. Most of the time you'll see that learning is a separate activity. Learning at work is separate from what you learn at home, what you learn in your family, what you learn in your personal life. They're saying evolve to a life-based learning model where all of the aspects of a person's life are integrated into their learning process at work. Their belief was that what we learn outside of work is often as important as what we learn inside of work. My husband and I conducted a spiritual-based leadership research program with executives around the world, and we asked them about their spirit, where their spiritual concepts and perspectives came from. And they always came from very rich sources of influences they had in their life, which informed them in their leadership. The competencies that they recognized for this life-based model are to recognize that there's multiple sources of learning beyond just the work environment and the expertise you need to get your job done. Balance integrity and utility. And to me, what that means is balancing the meaning and purpose that an individual feels for their own life to the utility of work that needs to get done. Shift the responsibility for learning to the individual. Acknowledge that contradictions are strengths. That's an interesting one to contemplate on. And invest in developing the whole person. The third component is to use a strength-based orientation. The strength-based orientation is where you look at what's right and what's working well, and then you invest your time, your money, your resources, your energy into building on that as you move to the new direction that you're going. So many times in the mergers and the takeovers that are going on today, and I know this happened in the oil and gas industry in the 80s, the new management or the new leadership comes in and they throw out, we say in the United States, they throw out the baby with the bathwater. And the strength-based approach says no. We go in and together we collaboratively look for what is right and what's working well. And we use that as a basis to build where we're going next. The competencies, they identified a lot of competencies for this strength-based approach. I'm going to just point out 3 of them. One is positive psychology. That's a psychologist named Mart Seligman who is responsible for that term. He says, identify the signature strengths of your employees. And when you allow your employees to use those signature strengths that they have as human beings in the normal course of their work, that is when they're going to experience authentic happiness. The second one is appreciative inquiry. That comes out of Case Western with Professor David Cooperrider. This is again where you look at what's going right, what you appreciate about what you already have, and you seek to build on that. Appreciative inquiry has been used to find solutions to major problems, not just in organizations but in societies. The third one is Dr. Mahalyi. I can't say his entire name. If anyone can teach me how to say that long name, that would be a benefit to me. But he talks about the flow theory, and this is also a very important concept in the knowledge era. We want to be in the flow. In sports, they say in the zone. Being in the zone and in the flow is where we all want to be when we're in our work. He says flow happens most often when you perfectly match the person's skill level to the challenge that they are taking on. When that's a perfect match, that's where you're going to most often find that they will be in the flow. The fourth component is to develop business wisdom. Again, we feel like the more that we can develop wisdom in our organizations, that is going to help to pave the way for what we believe is going to be the wisdom age that is already starting to dawn and already starting to show itself. In the research, they felt that wisdom is strength-based. It contributes to the human well-being and common good. They felt that wisdom was also contributes to synthesis. Wise thinking and actions pull us together into an integrated whole. But they also felt like wisdom is very practical, and I would agree with this as well. It has a very practical orientation which serves to guide our thinking and our action. The components of the business wisdom, I drew out these components from a Professor Baltus, who was he is founder of the lifespan psychology. And here's the components I saw that we need to develop in the knowledge era for business wisdom. The first one is the ability to address important and difficult questions about the conduct and meaning of life. Notice we're bringing in a term here that you don't normally talk about in business, and that is, what is the meaning of life? How does the meaning of life inform what we believe is the nature of business? This is the work that my husband and I do with spiritual-based leadership development. What is the meaning of life for us, and how does it impact our organizational culture? The second is the awareness of the limits of knowledge and the uncertainty. We haven't talked about that today so far. What are the limits of knowledge? What are the uncertainties that we need to be aware of when it comes to knowledge? We need to create knowledge that has extraordinary scope, depth, and balance in our organizations. We need a perfect synergy of mind and character. That's a very nice synthesis, I think, of wisdom. We need to use knowledge for the good and the well-being of ourselves and others, and we need to recognize when wisdom is manifested. One of the things they recognized in the research is that it's actually quite difficult to define exactly what wisdom is, but it's something you know when you experience. So the ability to acknowledge wisdom when it has been manifested is also a key competency in this knowledge era. I distilled some words here on this slide that to me are new concepts and language that are not commonly found in the business world today, that I believe are examples, again, of what this knowledge era, as it comes to maturity, we're going to begin to hear more of. Selflessness, holistic activities, balancing integrity and utility, signature strengths, wise thinking and actions, synergy of mind and character, equanimity, appreciative mindsets, whole person learning, authentic happiness, common good, and integrated whole. And so the question I want to leave each one of you with today, and I would love to hear your feedback on this during the time we have left or during the remaining conference, if you can share with me individually, what concepts and language of this knowledge era are you willing to be a champion for in your organization and in your position as knowledge professionals? Thank you very much.